this edition of Fix the Flick, we'll be looking at 2014's Lucy. Even though the 10% brain myth has been thoroughly debunked, the premise of a person becoming infinitely smarter has a lot of dramatic potential. And Scarlett Johansson is certainly talented enough to pull off the transformation from dumb blonde to brainy badass. Also, the threat of a whole gang of violent criminals gives Lucy an added element of danger over other mind-bending movies. However, Luc Besson overplayed his hand when it came to the main character's abilities. Lucy was always so powerful that she never had any difficulty doing anything.
And I need you to put your hands up, please.
She was also about as emotional as a giant tortoise. If your main character isn't even interested in what's going on, why should you expect any more from the audience? If Lucy had just been a normal person with some added brain power, the action scenes would have had a lot more tension, making them a lot more interesting. And the audience could have connected to Lucy if she had, fear and anger and a personality. In short, Lucy should have stayed a human being and not some untouchable god. So, with that in mind, let's try to fix Lucy. Instead of starting right outside the bad guy's building before we know anything about our main character, we go from the cell splitting to the outside of a French club the night before. Yes, this version is set in Paris rather than Taiwan. Lucy is arguing with her mother over the phone. We only hear her side of the conversation, but apparently Lucy's mother has been lying to her about her father being dead ever since she was a little girl. Lucy is furious about being lied to, and she basically accuses her mother of never really loving her. Lucy says that she feels the same and hangs up on her. Once inside the club, Lucy meets up with her roommate Caroline and her boyfriend Richard. Caroline asks if she's okay, but Lucy, still being angry about the phone call, snaps back at her, saying that the reason Caroline is always trying to pry into her life is because she doesn't have one of her own. Caroline quietly takes the abuse as Lucy proceeds to get drunk with Richard. Across town in an illegal drug lab, we see some chemists finish their first batch of a new synthetic drug. Suddenly, Mr. Jing and his men barge in, kill everyone, and take the drug. Jing tells his men that after selling it, they'll have the power to take over their rival's territory, with them not knowing who did it until it's too late. The next day, Lucy arrives very late to a meeting with Professor Norman. In this version, he's not some random scientist that Lucy finds over the internet. She's actually a student in one of his lower-level science classes. He tells her that he thinks she has potential, but she just hasn't been applying herself. Hungover from the previous night, Lucy is in no mood to listen to him. And when he suggests some extra credit projects to make up for all the work she's missed, Lucy implies that he just wants to spend some time alone with his female student. She then threatens to say that he made a pass at her if he doesn't give her a passing grade. Disgusted with her behavior, Norman kicks her out of his office, saying that she's a disappointment. Now we get the scene at the bad guy's building. Only now the audience knows a little more about Lucy's character, so we're a little more interested in seeing what happens to her. Instead of just handcuffing a briefcase to Lucy's wrist right before he gets killed, Richard tricks Lucy into going to the building with him. Even though the situation is extremely shady, Lucy waits while Richard talks to Mr. Jing. She then sees Richard wave to her as he leaves. It's clear that Richard specifically brought her there for a reason. Before she can do anything, though, Mr. Jing comes in and looks her over. He says that she'll do, and they knock Lucy out. From there, things go pretty much the same. They sew a bag of drugs into her stomach along with 3 other guys and threaten to kill their families if they don't cooperate.
I'm sure I don't need to remind you, but we have the names and addresses of the families of every one of you, down to the most distant cousins. Right?
As far as how Lucy gets the drugs into her system, everything plays out the same way it did in the released movie. The difference is that she isn't transformed into some superwoman. Instead, the overdose gives her the ability to remember, organize, and understand every piece of information she's ever come across. She can't stop time, she can't fly, she's just really good at problem solving. She uses the memory of a self-defense class to take out her guard. She She then yanks all of the fuses out of the electrical panel, killing the lights. And remembering the exact number and direction of the steps she took when they brought her into the building, we get a tense escape scene as she works her way around several armed gunmen. This is a little more interesting than...
Hey!
Lucy then makes her way to the hospital, but instead of murdering two innocent people on her way...
Speak English?
No, no, no. Ah!
You wouldn't have been able to save him anyway.
She simply recalls all the French she's ever heard and takes a cab to the emergency room. While there, she learns about the drug in her stomach and the fact that it helps fetuses develop their cognitive function. The twist comes when the doctor tries to report that she's a drug mule. Lucy does a little deductive reasoning and notices that he's divorced and he doesn't see his kids very much. She tells him that she was never close to her father, but that she's trying to get home to repair that relationship. He grudgingly lets her go, and Lucy heads to her apartment. Once there, she runs into Caroline. This scene in the original film had Lucy diagnose Caroline's liver disorder, all while she ignores everything Caroline's saying. This was probably meant to soften Lucy's character, but it really only underscored how out of touch Lucy was with everyone else, because there was no connection between the characters. This version has Caroline immediately notice something's wrong with Lucy. She starts to ask about it, but remembering Lucy's hateful comments the night before, she stops herself. Lucy picks up on her hesitation and says that she knows Caroline genuinely cares about her, and that she's been worried about her for a long time. Lucy says that she can finally see all of the negative patterns in her life, and she apologizes for how badly she's treated Caroline. Lucy then realizes that she needs to know more about the gang that did this to her. So, with Caroline's help, she lures Richard to their apartment. They knock him out and he wakes up blindfolded. Remembering part of a movie she once saw, Lucy tricks Richard into thinking that he's being tortured.
It won't hurt at first. It's too hot, you see. If you go into shock and all you feel is cold.
He tells her about Mr. Jing stealing the drugs and his power play against the rival gang. Richard says it was his job to get close to someone that Mr. Jing could use to transport the drugs. Lucy then reveals that his whole confession was recorded and that the torture wasn't real. Suddenly, Lucy's nose starts bleeding and she gets an agonizing headache. While Caroline tries to help her, Richard gets free and attacks them. He starts choking Lucy, only for Caroline to knock him out. Being reminded that Lucy is vulnerable makes her character more relatable, and it makes us doubt her ability to come out on top. In short, it gets us to root for her. Needing to know what's happening to her, Lucy heads to Professor Norman's lab. Norman tries to kick her out again, but Lucy recounts all of the psychological reasons for her past behavior, and all of the emotional reasons why Norman cares so much about his students. Professor Norman is taken aback by Lucy's major change in attitude and asks what's going on. She then tells him about her overdose and how it's affecting her. Norman gives Lucy an MRI and agrees to do some tests. He asks if he should call her mother or father. Lucy starts to say that she doesn't know her father when she suddenly remembers the last time she saw him. We see images of Lucy's father abusing her as a little girl, and her mother catching him. Lucy drops to her knees crying and asks herself how she could forget such a thing. Seeing her distress, Norman suggests that she stay and rest. However, she tells him that her mother is in danger from the people who did this to her, and she needs to set things right. So, Lucy forms a plan and turns herself into the police. But instead of mind reading, Lucy simply uses her photographic memory to tell the police where to find all of the other drug mules. We then get the same montage of the police rounding everyone up at the airport.
Bonjour. Monsieur, venez avec nous. Pas d'histoire.
While all that's going on, Lucy uses what she knows about Captain Del Rio to guess his computer password and learn about the rival gang Mr. Jing stole the drugs from. Del Rio then comes back and reports to his boss about the drug mules. Lucy, remembering every word that has ever been spoken to her, easily reads their lips and figures out what hospital they've taken the other mules to. Knowing she needs to get there before Mr. Jing, she steals Del Rio's car, and instead of plowing through drivers and pedestrians alike, She figures out the most direct route to the hospital. We then get a fun and murder-free car chase through back alleys and front yards to get to the drugs first. You know, instead of breaking the laws of physics, which make a really boring fight scene. After Lucy gets the drugs, she gets a call from Professor Norman. He tells her that her tests reveal her brain is working at a much higher level of efficiency. But that also means that she's metabolizing the drugs at an accelerated rate. He says that her headaches are a result of her body beginning to go into withdrawal, and that she doesn't have much time before her body starts reacting much more violently. She asks what would happen if she took more of the drug before that. Norman says that it will prolong her cognitive upgrade, but the crash might very well kill her. Knowing she has little time left and that Mr. Jing needs to be taken care of, Lucy makes several calls to numbers she found in Del Rio's computer. She sends out information to Mr. Jing that she wants to give the drugs back to him in exchange for her life. But she also calls the rival gang and tells them the same thing. Now both gangs are headed to the same place to get the drugs at the same time. Lucy sets the meet at the club from the beginning of the movie. And before everyone shows up, Lucy calls her mother. She apologizes to her and tells her that she knows that her father abused her when she was a child, and that she repressed the trauma. Her mother says that she was protecting her when she kept Lucy from knowing her father, and that she thought Lucy was better off not remembering everything he did to her. Lucy says that she loves her and that she always will. Suddenly, we see Mr. Jing show up with his heavily armed gang early. He demands that Lucy give him the drugs or he'll kill her family. She begins to stall Jing in order to give the rival gang time to get there. But she begins to get another really bad headache and Mr. Jing closes in. Just then, the rival gang shows up, and through intense pain, Lucy tells them that Mr. Jing was the one who stole their drugs, and that if they want them back, they'll have to get them. A firefight ensues, and the two gangs begin to wipe each other out. Lucy runs for cover and tries to survive. At the end of the fight, a badly wounded Mr. Jing makes his way towards Lucy. But before he can kill her, Del Rio shoots him dead. Lucy gives him a questioning look, and he tells her that his police car had GPS tracking. Del Rio sees that Lucy is in pain and asks if she needs a hospital. Faced with an uncertain outcome, Lucy holds up one of the drug packets and contemplates whether or not to take more of the drug. But before she decides, the screen cuts to black, leaving her decision unknown. So, that's how I would fix 2014's Lucy. Are there any movies that you think are in need of repair? If so, email me at the link down below or post a comment. And remember to click like and subscribe if you want to see more movies get fixed. Until next time, I'm Mr. Fix-It for Fix the Flick.